You know, the world is so full of bad news lately that sometimes it's nice to focus on just a happy, reassuring story that talks about the enduring human quality of generosity, for example. Like this story that came out within the past couple of days about the government of Qatar wanting to give President Donald Trump an airplane for free out of the goodness of their hearts. Let's learn a little bit more about that plane, courtesy of the BBC. This article, written by Jack Horton, Tom Edgington, and Joshua Cheatham, headline: Is President Trump allowed to accept a $400 million luxury plane? That's a headline that is just completely normal now. Is President Trump allowed to accept a $400 million luxury plane? Why, of course we have to seriously entertain that question. Quoting from the article, U.S. President Donald Trump has said his administration wants to accept a plane worth an estimated $400 million as a gift from Qatar, calling it a great gesture that he would be stupid to turn down. The potential move has been labeled wildly illegal by some members of the rival Democratic Party, something the White House denies, and it has attracted criticism from some of Trump's supporters. So let's skip ahead a little bit and find out some more specifics about this offer of a generous, no-strings-attached free gift and the plane itself. What do we know about the plane? On Sunday, U.S. media reported that the Trump administration was preparing to accept a Boeing jumbo jet from the Qatari royal family, saying that the plane would be refitted and used temporarily as Air Force One, the name for the plane used by presidents. Trump later posted on Truth Social, the Defense Department is getting a gift, free of charge, of a 747 aircraft to replace the 40-year-old Air Force One temporarily in a very public and transparent transaction. Because that's what you say to describe a totally legal and above-board deal, right? If you get a phone call from your spouse and they say, "Good news, honey, I got a new car." And you say, "Well, how did you get this new car?" And they say, "Oh, I acquired it in a very public and transparent transaction." You know that there's absolutely nothing else that you need to know about that transaction, right? There's no other questions to ask. There's nothing you need to worry about. Skipping ahead a little bit, a Qatari official has told CNN the plane is being given from the Qatari Defense Ministry to the Pentagon, and that it will be modified to meet Air Force One's safety and security standards. Experts say this is likely to take years, which means the plane may not be ready for use until near the end of Trump's term. Trump has said the plane will go directly to his presidential library after he leaves office, and that he wouldn't be using it after his presidency. Nonetheless, the move has led to criticism from Democrats as well as some longtime Trump supporters, including Laura Loomer, who said, "This is really going to be such a stain on the administration if this is true." Boy, it's telling not only when Trump starts to lose his own sycophants, but also the reasons that he may lose them. Laura Loomer stands beside him and is one of his number one cheerleaders as he's disappearing people from the country without due process and starting trade wars with our allies and talking shit about stealing Canada and stealing Greenland and stealing the Panama Canal and continuing to support the genocide in Gaza and all of this other shit that Trump has done just since he took office in January. None of that phases Laura Loomer, but oh gee, he might accept a corrupt gift of a plane from a foreign government. Well, that's too much. I can't support that. The abductions and the renditions and the genocide and the trade wars, that's all part of being president, right? That's why we elected him. But taking a free plane, no, sir, the line must be drawn here. These people are ridiculous. They shouldn't be taken seriously, and it really sucks for the state of our country that because of the position that a lot of them are in, we kind of have to take them seriously. Anyway, the plane. Let's talk about this plane. The question is, can Trump even legally accept this plane? I don't think that question ever entered Trump's mind because he doesn't really care whether something's illegal or not. He cares whether or not he can get away with it. And he figures he can get away with it because he's gotten away with everything else. So why shouldn't he accept a free plane from the government of Qatar? Why shouldn't he, in his mind, right? But if you actually cared about what the law says, if you actually cared about what the Constitution says, there is a section of the Constitution that you've probably heard about a lot since Trump became president the first time, because everybody's constantly trying to figure out whether or not he's violating that clause because of how just flagrantly and cartoonishly corrupt he is. It's called the Foreign Emoluments Clause, or simply the Emoluments Clause. It's found in Article 1, Section 9 of the United States Constitution. That's how important it is. Article 1. It's not even an amendment. It's part of the original text. And here's what the Emoluments Clause says. Quote, "No title of nobility shall be granted by the United States, and no person holding any office of profit or trust under them shall, without the consent of Congress, accept any present, emolument, office, or title of any kind whatever from any king, prince, or foreign state." So also an emolument, we don't usually hear that word in modern usage. We only ever hear the word emolument in reference to this clause of the Constitution. But an emolument is basically a fancy way of saying any kind of material gain that you get as a result of your job. Any kind of benefit, compensation, gift, what have you. That's an emolument. And, according to the Constitution, office holders, including the president, are not allowed to accept emoluments of any kind from foreign governments, from kings, princes, or foreign states, or foreign heads of state, presumably. So that seems pretty cut and dry. The government of Qatar wants to give Trump a plane. Can Trump accept the plane? No, he can't, because he's the president, and the president can't accept gifts from foreign heads of state. And it even says kings or princes. It's the Qatari royal family that wants to give it to him. So, no is the answer. But of course, like I said, Trump doesn't care whether it's legal or even whether it's constitutional. He wants that plane. He wants that plane. So he's going to get that plane. And he has come up with, or actually not him, but people who work for him, people in his administration, they have come up with what they think is a way around the Emoluments Clause. Because if the plane being given to Trump by the Qatari government is to be used as Air Force One, well then, it's not being given to Trump, is it? It's being given to the United States government. It's being given to the Defense Department, and they will own the plane. Temporarily, and then after Trump leaves office, whenever that is, then, even then, it will not be his plane. Oh no. He will not be taking private personal ownership of the plane, rest assured. It will go to his presidential library, which is totally different and completely okay. So, nothing to worry about. Except, maybe there is something to worry about. Let's read a little bit more from this BBC article. Quote, "Currently, U.S. officials can accept gifts valued at less than $480. I feel like $400 million is a little above that limit. Although Trump has referred to the plane ultimately going to his library, experts have suggested he really means his museum foundation. Ex-presidents typically have a library housing their archive of documents and a museum, typically funded by private donations, full of memorabilia and open to the public. Experts who BBC Verify spoke to said the fact that the plane could be given to the administration and not to the president directly before being transferred to his museum may not get around the potential violation of the Constitution. Jordan Leibowitz from the organization Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington said any use of the plane by Trump after leaving office would cross a line. Reagan's Air Force One ended up in his presidential library, but there's a difference there. The plane was decommissioned, Reagan never flew on it again, and it sits inside as a museum piece. And there's another really important difference between the possible new Air Force One that Trump wants to accept from Qatar and the version of Air Force One that was decommissioned and now is a museum exhibit at the Reagan Presidential Library. And that is the version of Air Force One that is on display at the Reagan Library was in service for decades before it was decommissioned and given to the Reagan Library. It was technically known as SAM 27,000, SAM, Special Air Mission. That's sort of the call sign for Air Force One, Special Air Mission 27000. It first became Air Force One during the Nixon administration in the early 70s. It was Air Force One during Nixon's presidency, Ford, Reagan, George H.W. Bush, Bill Clinton, and George W. Bush. Early in George W. Bush's term, because it was retired in 2001, but George W. Bush did fly on it. It was used as Air Force One, at least a little bit during Bush's term. So it was Air Force One for a long-ass time. Remember what was said in the BBC article. If Trump accepts this plane, and it is to be put into service as Air Force One, it will require extensive upgrades and renovations. So extensive that it will be several years before it is ready to go into service as Air Force One, by which time Trump's presidency, hopefully, may almost be over. And then when Trump is no longer president, he gets to keep the plane. Let's look at this in a different way. Okay? Let's look at this. Let's pretend that we're not talking about a plane. Let's just talk about the money. Because President Trump says it's a free gift. There's no strings attached. They're not asking for anything in return. I would be stupid not to accept the offer. They're giving us a free plane. They're giving us a free plane. Let's not talk about the plane. Let's just talk about dollars and cents. The plane is estimated to be worth right now about $400 million. So let's talk about that. Let's say instead of being given a plane by the royal family of Qatar, let's say President Trump was being given $400 million from the government of Qatar. And let's say Trump said, oh, they're not giving the $400 million to me. I'm going to give the $400 million to the Defense Department. And they can spend the $400 million on whatever they want as a part of the Defense Department while I'm president. And then when I'm not president anymore, I'll just take whatever's left of the $400 million that they didn't spend, and I'll take it with me. But I'm not going to spend it. It's not going to be my money. I'll donate it to my presidential library. Would that be okay? If we were talking about money instead of an airplane, would that be okay? Would anybody be arguing that he should be allowed to do that? Now, I realize we're talking about $400 million, and if we were just talking about $400 million in cash, obviously, if he just gave it to the Pentagon and said, spend it on whatever you want, and then I'll take what's left over when I'm done being president, there's not going to be any money left over from the $400 million if you just give it to the Pentagon in cash, right? The Pentagon could spend that $400 million, no problem. The Pentagon probably spends $400 million every time Pete Hegseth flushes the toilet he just puked in, okay? The money's gone if we're talking about cash. But just for the sake of the hypothetical, let's say it's cash and Trump gives it to the Defense Department and then he takes back whatever's left when he's no longer president and gives it to his presidential library. Is there anybody who could argue that that was okay? Because even if Trump isn't keeping it himself, even if he isn't putting it in his own pocket, it's still to his benefit. It's still benefiting his presidential library. It's not serving a benefit to the American people because the money's gone. The government doesn't have it anymore. The government can't spend it on anything. The government can't use it on anything. Trump has it. And he decided what to spend it on. And he gave it to his presidential library so they could use it to improve their exhibits, to improve their facilities, to make their location more of a tourist attraction, to gild more surfaces, whatever. Can you imagine what a fucking monstrosity Trump's presidential library is going to be? It's the only presidential library that's going to be 75% gift shop. But anyway, nobody would, in their right mind, would ever think that that was remotely okay. But because it's a plane, there are people arguing that this should be permissible, that this isn't that big of a deal. Well, why can't Trump accept a plane from people? And this notion, this childish suggestion, this childish insistence that this is a no strings attached deal, that this isn't a bribe, this isn't something meant to make Trump compliant to the wishes of a foreign government, to put Trump in the pocket of a foreign government. This is ridiculous. Are we children? Are we supposed to just give Donald Trump? You wouldn't give a good president the benefit of the doubt on this. We're supposed to give Donald Trump the benefit of the doubt on this when he says it's just a free gift. They don't want anything in return. This president specifically, who treats everything as a transaction. This president specifically, who has arbitrarily raised tariffs on every country in the world, including Qatar. Although Qatar's tariffs haven't been raised as much as other places. Qatar got the baseline 10% added tariff. But maybe the royal family of Qatar decides they don't want those tariffs anymore in the future. Sometime in the next few years when Trump is still president. Maybe they decide, hey, you know what? Maybe you should just roll back the tariffs on us completely. Maybe the United States doesn't need to have tariffs on our country at all. I mean, we did give you that plane, right? You know, we scratch your back, right? This is the kind of situation that the emoluments clause is designed to prevent from ever happening. There can't be a quid pro quo if there's not a quid, right? Or a quo, I guess. That's how it works. Quid pro quo. So there can't be a quid if there's not a quo, right? That's why the emoluments clause is there. The president or any other elected official, any other office holder, they're not allowed to accept gifts from foreign governments because then it doesn't even create the situation where an American official could be in the pocket, could be in the debt, could be on the take of a foreign government. It just completely erases that, or at least legally speaking. I mean, obviously it could still happen illegally, but if you find out, you get in lots of trouble, unless you're Donald Trump, who we just let do whatever he wants, apparently. Even if the government of Qatar gives Donald Trump a $400 million airplane, which he then gives to the Defense Department so it can spend an additional however many hundreds of millions or billions of dollars more to upgrade it to be Air Force One, and then it's Air Force One for, a couple of months, and then Trump takes the plane home with him when he's done being president. Even if all of that happens, it's okay. He's not going to personally benefit from it because he promised to give it to his presidential library, and he said he's never going to fly on it after he's president. He gave his word. Donald Trump gave his word. So we have nothing to worry about because you all know what Donald Trump's word is worth, especially at the Pentagon, where that and $1,300 will get you a cup of coffee.